This episode begins in Santa Cruz, where the last one ended. Uh, I was downtown Santa Cruz. It was nighttime, and I made no effort to find any particular place to sleep, so I wound up sleeping on a park bench. Well, not a park, but a street bench. It was a bus bench, sheltered. It was off to the side. So I hadn't gone to sleep. I just laid down and I was about ready to go to sleep when some kid came up from behind me and tapped me roughly. And this kid, and there were some other kids with him. There were a whole bunch of kids, I'd say late teens. And of course, I was about 30. And they wanted to start a fight. And so I took it from there. It was nighttime. There was a street lamp nearby, so I ran out into the street under the street lamp. I figured that was just my initial reaction. That was my instinct. And then these kids, I don't know, at least 5 of them. There might have been 10. I don't know how many there were. And they were harassing me. They were threatening me. They were trying to get at me. So I didn't know what their intentions were. I really didn't know. I had to assume that they were trying to kill me because that was consistent with the way they were behaving. And there were a lot of residents of Santa Cruz who didn't like people who were living on the street. I was a person who did live on the street. I probably was known to quite a few people. Apparently, I was known to them. And so there I was under the street light, and they were menacing me at a slight distance. And in the previous days, I had been up on campus at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I had taken lessons in Tai Chi Chuan, which is a Chinese martial art. Reputedly, it never loses. No one has ever lost a fight if you've studied Tai Chi Chuan. True or not, I don't know. So I used some of its movements to figure out a way to continuously circle, go around, spin around in a circle slowly, keeping your eyes, one eye open, the other eye closed, but looking in a direction into your field of view so that you can, anybody who sees you from one side and sees only the eye that's closed, doesn't see that your other eye is open, you're able to see in their direction. And then as you turn around, you're in a different, he's no longer able to see your eyes, and you change your eyes. The one that's open, you close. The one that's closed, you open. And then you start doing the same thing, looking into your field of view from a different angle and seeing other people who might be in this new field of view, if they're all around you. So I had worked this out, and I didn't want to think excessively about it. I worked it out very gradually, and it seemed to work. So what I did there down in town was I immediately went into I raised my hands to my side and cupped my hands like this, but had them out like this, and I crouched. I went down, crouched my knees, and I started hissing. I hissed as I did this. And so this was my announcement that I was going to fight. I was going to stand and fight. I was not going to run. I was into this to the extent that they wanted to get into it themselves. So I took this position, and then I immediately went into this routine that I had worked out. I closed one eye, and I looked at with the other eye out into a certain place in my field of vision where I could get the most into my field of view. And so then I started to turn as I worked out, and I confused these people. They didn't know what I was doing, and as far as I know, they thought that my eyes were closed. That was the whole point of the routine that I worked out. So they started to move around, and they started to size me up. And then I got to a certain location, and one of them sort of came close to me. And I held out my arm. I had also taken Aikido at school, at college in Santa Cruz. And I did a warm-up motion with the hands like this. Yeah, like this, and you pull it back to you. And I said to the guy, what does this mean? Because I wanted to know how he reacted to the most fundamental martial arts motion or practice routine, to see if he recognized it, to see if he was familiar at least with Aikido, and it's probably done my other martial arts too. And he got really wary of me, and he said, "You better take the art seriously." So I gauged from the way he said that he was not a black belt. You know, he was not able to tell what I was doing, and I immediately adjusted my battle plan to the point where I wasn't expecting a sudden attack and with killing blows. So I lowered the stakes enough. So I walked over someplace else, trying to flee them, but they followed. Two of them came right up by me, and I was another part of the street, and I was standing there, and I put my feet out to the side, to each side. I spread eagled my feet, but I was standing straight up, and I put my hands together, clasping them flat like this. And one of these guys was on my right side in front of me, and the other guy was on the left side in front of me. It was nighttime, it was wee hours of the morning. And I just stood there, waiting for them to make the first move, the next move. And several seconds went by. It seemed like a lifetime. And then this guy over here, this guy over here, hauled back and kicked me in the groin. He kicked me in the groin. But my testicles had been pulled up because of the tension of the fight. So he didn't hit my testicles, he just hit flesh in my crotch, in this area of my loins. And because it didn't hit me, I just said, as I was standing there, I was still with my hands clasped like this, I said, "I am not hurt." And his mouth dropped. The guy who had hit me, his mouth dropped. And and then this guy came out of the shadows. This little short guy came out of the shadows. And he walked right, apparently he was not with the assailants, and he walked right up to me, put out his hand. I took his hand, he shook my hand, and he said to me, "Welcome to Santa Cruz." I won the fight. That was all that I could assume from that. There had been apparently a crowd gathering and watching the fight to see what would happen, and the fact that this guy saw that it was safe for him to enter at that point the fight was over. So, and then so I didn't say anything. I just shook my head or something like that. And then this little crowd of people passed through where we were, and it was a mixed crowd, men and women. And one of the women came up close to me and looked at me very carefully and said to the group, he said, "It's not him." So apparently one possible explanation to why they started this fight was that they thought that I was somebody else who had done something to her or to somebody else that she knew of. And so it was a vigilante, might have been a vigilante. But as the crowd was present and she said this to me, I took it as an opportunity to speak to somebody in society for the first. I had been homeless. I wasn't talking to people. Nobody knew what I was doing. But I had been doing some investigation of a suspicion that I had been told by some animals in the Santa Cruz mountains that there was going to be an earthquake. Okay, and I had tried to estimate the size of it. And I had two possible interpretations of what I had seen. One was that it was going to be in the 5 area, Richter scale. The other that was going to be 10. Of course, the 10 would be enormous. But I chose at this time to announce that I thought there was going to be an earthquake. I said, there's going to be an earthquake. It's going to be, 5.6, whatever I thought it was going to be. and they just looked at me kind of funny, and they went on. They left. So the next day, I was sitting with a box of my supplies. I had water and various things. I kept garlic. I bought some. I thought that would be a good thing to have, and that was good. So I was sitting with my box on a bench in town, and it was just about dawn. The sun had just come up, and it was still fairly dark. But this car came down. This was a day or two or so after the fight, after I had announced that there was going to be an earthquake. A car. It was a station wagon, painted in camouflage. And it said on the side of it, and it was just slowly going down the road. In front, it went right by me on the road. And it was very slowly going by. It said on the side of it, Earthquake America. In white paint, it said, on the camouflage. And it was just going down the road. And on the top, on the roof of the car, there was a box built onto the roof with about a foot, the foot high planks, like wood or something, and a square box. And in the box were 4 bloodhounds arranged in a pinwheel. They were sitting, like sitting up, looking out, just looking straight into space, but they were sitting in a pinwheel shape on top of this car, and it was going slowly through town. So I assumed that this was just a grassroots operation. Whenever they heard there was an earthquake going to be, or where they suspected there was going to be, or maybe every day they did this, I don't know. They would go through town when there was nobody around to disturb them, and these bloodhounds would be sniffing around for signs of an earthquake. I had heard that the Chinese did things with animals, being sensitive to what animals were going through, and that this was considered to be a possible way of detecting when earthquakes would happen. Unusual experience. So that was my fight with Aftermath. So then after that I did some traveling. I went to New Haven. I had some adventures, and I came back to Santa Cruz, and then and when I was in New Haven, I managed to finish my senior thesis for my physics degree. I was staying at a shelter for a few days, and I used they had tables there, so I sat down and finished. I managed to get a copy. How I did that, I don't know. I contacted my advisor and got a copy of my thesis, worked on it there, finished it, sent it off to him, and I heard that I was accepted, so I knew I was going to get my degree. I wandered through the country. I had various adventures. Got back to Glen Ellen. Showed up at my brother's doorstep. He was buying the house for my mother where we had grown up in Glen Ellen. He was living there alone at the time. And he allowed me to stay with them. I stayed with them for a few months. But while I was there, I got in the mail my diploma, my second bachelor's degree diploma, and that was great. And I also, when I was staying with him, I started to do some drawing, and I discovered that I could now draw. I had taken lots and lots of drawing classes when I was an apprentice in architecture in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It never seemed to click at the time. I wasn't able to draw very well, but I practiced a lot. For some reason, and I think it's because it was after the initiation, things started to gel for me, and I was able to draw very sharply, very crisp detail, very accurate, very realistic. I was able to draw. For some reason, I was just suddenly able to do it, and I went and did a lot of drawings. But things didn't pan out as far as staying there for a long time, so I left and I went out east. I took my backpack with a bunch of drawings in it. And out east, I had some travels and I had some experiences. I got into fights and I learned how to defend myself. I went on a cycle. I was in 3 places. I was in New York City, New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is located, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I had lived after graduating. And I went in a circle 3 times around those 3 places, and I would hitchhike between the places. And this lasted for a couple of years. And when I was in New York, I learned how to stay in the men's shelter. And it was a very tough place. There were a lot of tough characters who stayed there. A lot of black people, mostly black people. They were very tough, and I had to learn how to defend myself. I got in a lot of fights and lost before I finally won one. And I didn't get into any fights after that. So it was the confidence of knowing how to win that took me to the next level as far as defending myself, being confident on the street, just having more presence, you might say. So that happened in New York, and I once when I was in New Haven, this was in the years 1982 to 1984, so about 2 years. And when I was in New Haven, being homeless, I spent some time on campus wandering around because I knew it. And I happened to be at the Yale Law School. And I saw this. I looked at a bulletin board, and I was just looking around, and I saw this notice. It was an announcement for a seminar or a colloquium or something that was going to be held in the near future, discussing the topic of monarchies in the United States. And it said on that notice that it had a factual statement, or whether it's fact or not, I don't know, but it said that there were 550 some odd monarchies in the United States. And this lecture or seminar was going to be about that topic. This floored me because the United States is democracy, right? We have a democratically elected government. Why would there be any monarchies here? Because a monarchy is they're not elected, they're king, and their kids become king, and there's a long line of kings, and they're not elected. So how does this jive with the United States being a democracy? I don't know. And I continue not to know, and I continued to think about it because this was something that had a certain amount of legitimacy, being on a bulletin board at the Yale Law School. Maybe it was totally fictitious. Who knows? But because you might want to go in that direction with it, because it's a lot to believe, a lot to accept. But I just put it in the back of my mind, and it started me to thinking in a general way about that topic. So that was an important event, and then I wound up back at Cambridge and went to a hospital because that was a way to get out of the cold and without food. And I met my psychiatrist there, of course, and she was a very hot young lady, and we got along very well. And she asked me out, and I declined because I thought that it was not appropriate. And the last meeting that we had, we hugged, and I cried a little bit because I didn't, it wasn't going to come about, but it was a very unique experience. And I left the hospital. I had to leave, and I spent 3 days wandering Cambridge. I found a blanket at the Salvation Army. I took my clothes off underneath the blanket, and I wore the blanket, and I walked away from all my property, and I began to walk around Cambridge with just a blanket around me, with no clothes on underneath. And this was my trial by fire, and I survived it. And then I made it to a shelter that I stayed at. I went to a church. They got me to a shelter. Stayed at the shelter for 3 days. Then I went to a different shelter I found out about for 3 days. And then I went to the Salvation Army in Boston for 3 days. And I got on the waiting list for the Parker Street shelter. And that begins the next episode. And that will be about my bivouac at Parker Street.